Let's keep it going and let's talk about some other personalities involved here. The presentation in Dallas ends, and Bob Carter has to obviously discuss the investment with his board and get you a term sheet. You're flying home on the Panda jet. Take us back. What's the tone and tenor of that conversation with you and your dad and Bob? As you're not flying back on American Airlines, you're flying back on Bob's jet. It went well.
And in so many ways, shockingly surreal. Like, that's even if the meeting would have gone great, flying back on the Panda jet would have, I mean, I couldn't have dreamed that up. You know, I didn't even think it's an option, candidly.
Yeah.
So being on that jet probably told the three of us all we needed to know, at least for that day. Okay, the meeting at least went well. Hey, he may be being polite and, you know, send us on our way, but at least he gave us a nice ride home.
Yeah.
Optimistically, I'm like, okay.
He wouldn't do this if he wasn't doing business with us.
Or it's certainly going to take a long, hard look at it.
So what's your dad or Bob thinking? Are they seeing the same thing you are? Everybody's in the same line of thinking?
Yeah, pretty much. And, you know, at least for the next 24, 48, 72 hours until we really heard back, we were strategizing on getting in front of the next potential investor.
So you get the term sheet from Panda. Panda is going to replace Health South on the $400,000 letter of credit, which is what you needed to be on pay-per-view. You're going to pay Health South the last $150,000 that your father promised they would repay. And they're going to loan you the money for each show going forward. In return, they want 51% of the company and Health South to go away. They also request creative control, and Health South would have to accept a $1.1 million loss. What'd you think of this deal?
So, Conrad, there are times in my life and my business life when, yes, I'm in the middle of it, but it's not my decision. And boy, did I see some shrewd dealings. And Bob Carter, and I shared it with him much, much later, but I learned a lot of lessons observing that. He stepped up and said, all right, folks, it's 51%. We're going to get control of this because I'm funding it. And folks, you carried us this far, but it's game, set, match. And you knew what you're getting into. I'll just say this. It was one by one by one. Bob would have the conversation, or somebody with Panda. Do you need them for the next show? Yes, sir. Okay. He didn't need Health South. So Health South was dealt with very shrewdly. Again, they didn't want any headaches, but they would like some money back. Nope. Bob, I learned a lot again from observing. You know, I mean, you can name, if it wasn't essential to Wednesday night pay-per-view talent production, it was game, set, match. We're moving on. We appreciate what you did and carried us through, but it's over.
What'd you think of the, you know, I got to ask, creative control? Now let's remember, this ain't Hulk Hogan or Bret Hart asking for it. This is the owner of an energy company. And he says, I want creative control.
And that statement's not accurate.
Okay.
It is, they wanted control, and the conversations that literally from once we got into, okay, we're going to do this. I was appointed COO and I multiple times, but Janice's voice always rings in my head. Jeff, you do the wrestling and the buck stops with you, but finance, legal, accounting, all the headaches, that's what we're great at. That's how we make our money in the energy business. That's what we do best. We know how to deal in legal, all this. Jeff, quit worrying about this. And that was the deal. And so
in your head, this may have been an even better partner than Health South. Of course, you were familiar with Health South, but when somebody says, Jeff, you take care of wrestling, we'll take care of the rest, that's got to be a massive weight off your shoulders, because prior to this, when it was just you and your dad, sort of even before Health South, it's like
everything.
I'm doing it all. And it had to be like drinking water from a fire hydrant. And so when somebody says, no, just do the wrestling, we'll take care of all this other shit that you don't have experience with and you don't find very fun or interesting, let's free you up to be creative. That's probably like, hell yeah, high fives all around, right?
Ain't kidding, bud.
Yeah.
In so many ways. And that kind of feeling for the next, I don't want to say year, 2 years, 3 years, but that is what went down. I mean, look, there was a lot of bumps and bruises, and Russo and my father, and you referenced Chris Sobel, and we went through 3 or 4 Panda, we'll call it representatives or controllers. I use the term as a accountant controller. We can call it a bunch of different things, but there were a lot of bumps and bruises. But for the most part, Dixie was president, and I don't want to say figurehead, but a lot of it, for all intents and purposes, and she got named president a year and a half, 2 years later. But out of the gate, I was COO, and that's sort of how things were run. And you're right, Conrad. I was elated. And to think where the relationship with Richard, and he didn't want anything. He wanted to be strictly a silent partner.
Yeah.
Period.
Here's some money. Now you go handle it all, Jeff.
Exactly.
So Scrushy winds up resigning as CEO of Health South before the final call takes place. And I think I read that you were at Dixie's office for all of this. You're trying to line up conference calls to get the deals done. Were you concerned that this could come unraveled here? I mean, seemingly you found we'll call it a golden parachute for you and your business, but you've got to have some cooperation, and no longer is it your old pal that is on the other side of that decision. How nervous were you lining up these calls?
Not really nervous or even anxious. It was new ground for me, in a lot of ways. And when I say that, it was just like my attorney, who I'd met through Mark Miller and got an entertainment attorney. We work well together, and she, the home office was out west, but her branch and her office was in Nashville. And I can't tell you how many hours I spent in her office as a lead up to it and building the business and all this. And now here we are 4 months in, and Bob Carter, basically checked off the boxes. South, you're gone. This person's whatever it is. And I mean, rightly so, because it was his money, but he basically came to an agreement, and this is what we're going to do with you, attorney, but you're out because I'm doing the legal. Panda's doing the legal. And so I hated the situation, but she was no longer with the company. And so, seeing all these calls go along, and then knowing what's going on in the public with Scrushy and Health South and that ugliness, and us being able to not miss a beat, I was very grateful, and a lot of blessings, and the timing of it was surreal. I could remember sort of the timing of it, that Labor Day weekend and how that fell into place. But yeah, I got a crash course unexpectedly on, I don't want to call it big business, but investor relations and investor replacement and everything that went with that. It was very interesting for me to observe.